All right. Welcome to the Thriving Launch Podcast with your hosts, Luis Congdon and Kamala Chambers.
Can saying no be good for your business? Well, we're going to get into that and answer just that question today.
I love that because it's so different than, a lot of people think about high power level people saying yes to a lot of things or just being like immediate action takers. But, the more that you scale and grow your business, the more you're going to have to say no. So let's jump into it and introduce Shauna. Welcome to Thriving Launch with Luis Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
How would you like to be able to interview world-class experts? Sit down and have chats with people like Jack Canfield, Marianne Williamson, Robert Kiyosaki, Tim Ferriss, you name it. Would you love to interview other people that you really admire and consider to be your heroes? Well, we've created a course for you that teaches you how to podcast, how to set it all up, and how to get going so that you can really have a successful show and you can do it properly. Over at thrivinglaunch.com, we have a podcasting course, and it's there for you, waiting for you to snatch it up. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com and let me teach you how to podcast the right way.
Well, today we're here with a special guest, Shauna Mackenzie. She's a speaker, content marketer, communication specialist, image consultant. I mean, the list of things she does goes on and on and on. And so today we're going to talk about something that is really near and dear to Shauna that has helped her leverage and grow her business. And that is something called the Yes Diet. Welcome to the Thriving Launch Podcast. You can check out all the resources that we're going to talk about today on today's show at thrivinglaunch.com. Welcome to the show, Shauna.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know that we've got the Yes Diet that you have that is your specialty. Can you just tell the listeners a little bit about what it is and why people would want to know about it?
This is essentially a new lifestyle and mindset for entrepreneurs to approach. And the reason that it's so important for those that are self-employed and running a business to approach this as a lifestyle is that we just, by our nature, have this magnetism to saying yes to things. We love shiny objects, we love projects, we're super motivated, and we get highs off of these short little and big successes, but we kind of we have this tendency to kind of jump from thing to thing to thing because everything is so fulfilling. And a lot of times this works just fine for maybe a couple years, but then you kind of get into year 3 or year 4 or reach kind of a rut and things kind of get stagnant and you realize that you're incredibly overwhelmed, you're overcommitted, you're stressed beyond belief, and you don't really feel like you're being paid the value that you're worth. And I think at some point, we've all felt that in our path of entrepreneurship over the years. There's always been a point where it's like, gosh, I don't feel like I'm able to instill what this value is. And I'm talking, my closest field is service providers. So I can really speak to service providers in this one.
I know that when Kamala and I got started in our business, one of the biggest problems that I had, and Kamala's been one of the greatest teachers for this for me, is I said yes to a lot of people and sometimes would have days where I would have tons of different things that I was doing that were completely free. And Kamala was like, you're going to have to learn how to say no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's frightening because our brain doesn't exactly react to no very well, and the people around us don't really react to no very well. But what happens without us even really realizing it is that when we are kind of broached with no, or someone says no to us in a tactful and friendly way, it does something to their value. It almost kind of up levels them in a sense. And, some people use it just for that kind of power move in and of itself. We want to use it from a genuine, authentic place. But if you can start saying no to the things that really are not aligned with what's kind of worthwhile of your time and in your zone of genius, as we like to call it, then you do kind of put yourself in this space and kind of build this air and this energy around you that you're a highly sought after professional. And that travels very quickly.
Is there any specific practice that you recommend for trying out the yes diet?
Yeah, I mean, kind of knowing when to say no is relatively easy, but actually saying it is the hard part. So one of the easiest tactics off the bat, just to say no, when you're caught in a moment where you get triggered to say yes and then later regret it, is to sandwich your no's. And so we like to start with a positive statement, drop the no, and then end with a positive statement. So something like, I'm so glad you thought of me for this networking event. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend, but I just know it's going to be a success. So learning the actual verbiage is one thing. And then the second thing is to buy yourself time always. So instead of making split-second decisions, which a lot of entrepreneurs and especially extroverts, actually, I hate to pick on extroverts, but they fall into this pattern and this triggering sense of just saying yes in the heat of the moment when their mind hasn't had a chance to even process what they're saying yes to. So the biggest key is whatever you can do to buy yourself time. And I find, again, having a specific statement like, oh, great, let me double check my calendar. Oh, I have to run this by my assistant, or something that buys you a little bit of time is really, really key, because oftentimes the trigger truly is just that heat of the moment. We're excited, or we honestly just don't want to feel guilty. So we say yes to satisfy the other person.
It really makes me think of like Facebook. And I used to have this kind of compulsive need to respond to every message as soon as I saw it and stay engaged in messages. And now, because the business and the popularity of what I'm up to has grown, I get asked a lot more questions. I get asked a lot more things of me. And I've learned to quickly glance at the message, and whether or not I read the whole message and the person can see that I've read the whole thing, I don't always respond right away. Or sometimes I'll say, let me get back to you on that, or I just won't respond. And it's actually helped my business grow, because this is something a lot of business owners don't get, is that being available all the time for everyone. And I think this is a good takeaway lesson, actually, really, for today's show, Kamala, is that, one of the problems I've had, Kamala, was being too available, and not saying no to enough things. And now that I've started to say yes to the things that really matter and that are really high leverage activities, I'm saying no to more things, and it's helped the business grow. And this is something we're going to confront as new business owners. It's actually something that's pretty important, I think, because as your business is growing, there's going to be, okay, we need to build a new website. Are you going to be the person that does that? And then there's these clients that have these little issues. Are you going to handle them, or are you going to learn to say, I just don't take on clients at this value anymore?
Absolutely. And you're so right about that. Being too available is something that we talk a lot about in the Yes Diet program, and how to set those boundaries. So you, in essence, are teaching people how to communicate with you. My husband, for example, has a wonderful voicemail on his phone. And when you call him and it goes to voicemail, it says, I do not check voicemail very often because of the amount of phone calls that I get. The fastest way to get in touch with me is to shoot me a text here, or here is my email address. So that he's already eliminated a whole channel of communication, the phone and checking voicemails, from his activity list, by essentially teaching people how to communicate best with him.
Yeah, that's so important to have a way, some sort of boundary set up. So what's something else that someone's going to get out of your Yes Diet course? What are some things that maybe we don't just think about when we're saying no or we're saying yes? Like, what are some other pieces?
Yeah, we first walk you through what's triggering you to say yes, and there's 5 important triggers. And once we figured out that, then we figure out, okay, what are we going to do with the things that we said yes to, and now we need to clean up. And so you have all these different channels. You have the channel of editing or eliminating, and we talk about things, activities, and people, as harsh as that sounds to eliminate a person. But sometimes we need to end a relationship or sort of ignore a relationship. We need to certainly let go of certain activities activities. And then we move on to delegating, we move on to streamlining, and then we move on to accepting. So the bulk of what we're really doing is we're not telling you to say eliminate yes entirely. We're trying to help you find a good, healthy balance of the right kind of yes. And once we've kind of cleaned out what currently exists in your life to make the space for that time and that energy and that money to come back to you, then we implement a mentality of everything needs to earn its spot in my life. Activities, people, things, everything has to earn its spot. And that's truly, if you can live by that lesson day in and day out, it's really the only way that you're going to be able to keep that space alive for the new things that you ideally want to bring in.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I mean, I consider myself a highly productive person, and I think one of the most important things is when I'm focused on a task or a project that I just kind of cut everything else out that doesn't need to be there and focus on the stuff that's the personal care. And, like I don't answer the phone. I don't respond to the text during those times. Mm-hmm. And the project is what the focus is. And I think that's one thing, because I work a lot with people who do product launches and online launches and launching their classes. That's one thing that people get a lot of really scattered.
Yeah.
They get scattered because there's so many things to do, and they get pulled off by all these things. And the place that I really like to start with people is, okay, let's just make the commitment to dive fully into this, let go of those energy drains, and let's get started.
Absolutely. One of the biggest tips that I can give is to turn off all notifications on your phone, on your computer. So that little fly-in email notification, the notification that someone new just followed you on Instagram, those are all hitting our brain and making us, it's the equivalent of like cocaine and addiction. When something good happens and we're firing off those neurons, it's the same thing that they've now studied with an Instagram follower popping up, or you get a new email. Our dopamine is literally becoming addicted to all these notifications. And it takes us on average about 25 minutes to refocus back to the thing we were doing prior to clicking on that notification. 25 minutes. So imagine all the notifications you get sidetracked on and how much time you're spending just trying to refocus.
Oh man, if Shauna was in the room with me and the way that I function, I'm like ADD. I'm like, okay, I'm texting this person, I'm messaging this person on Facebook, and I'm trying to write a blog post, and then I'm scheduling someone for the show via email.
Well, multitasking really does not work. They've proven that.
Well, it's working okay over here, but it could use some fixing.
Well, and there's a Pomodoro technique. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a really wonderful way to work. And a Pomodoro is essentially 20 to 25 minutes of intense, focused work, and then a short break, usually around 5 to 7 minutes. And then you'll do that again, 20 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 20 minutes on, 5 minutes off, and then you'll take a 25-minute break. And the Pomodoro technique, this type of work style, really works for a lot of people. And there's tons of apps. If you just search Pomodoro in the App Store, there's all kinds of them for your iPhone that'll help you with the timer and the clock and all of this. And that seems to be a style that people have said they're getting a lot more done working in those sort of like intense 25-minute work styles and then the 5-minute break.
That's a really great thing too, is having short intensities. It's interesting because for me, the way that I get into subject matters is I try to dive as deep into that subject. So, I wanted to learn about raw foods, for example. So I became a 95 to 100% raw vegan, raw foodist for 3 months. And I took a cooking course and I joined these groups and started attending them, and I always find that I become very knowledgeable when I concentrate that level of effort into something.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I mean, and it's true that it works, whatever that time span is going to be, but knowing that you've got a limit on it. I mean, a lot of what we talk about in the Yes Diet is a sort of restriction, which a lot of people run away from, especially entrepreneurs. But when we realize that restrictions actually equate to freedom, we then can use them in a way that's empowering and creates more abundance for ourselves. And I'm sure you've heard of Parkinson's law. If we've got the space and the time, we will fill it, even if it doesn't need to be filled. And so with Parkinson's law, we can use that to our advantage by setting artificial restrictions and barriers. My husband and I recently moved onto a boat. That's been his lifelong dream, to live on a boat. And we renovated kind of an old like motor yacht style boat. We moved in May, and we didn't have internet or TV for the first 2 months. So I was restricted to getting everything done at my office when I'm normally used to coming home, being able to sit on my laptop. But I was getting more done with that restriction because I knew I was sort of on a deadline than I was previously when I had access to internet. And I think you could think of all kinds of examples in your own life where some sort of imposed restriction has actually caused you to get a lot more done in a shorter and smaller amount of time.
Is there anything else that you want to make sure the audience walks away with today about increasing your productivity and finding your way through your no?
Well, I think the biggest thing that a lot of business owners will struggle with is pricing. And again, I'm kind of speaking to service providers and those kind of selling their expertise, but that's where no starts to really strengthen your business, because I'm finding that entrepreneurs and those that are self-employed selling their time have difficulty actually charging what their value is and actually not discounting their services. And unfortunately, women tend to struggle with this a little bit more than men. And so eventually, if you don't figure out what your value is and charge accordingly, and if you don't stop discounting your services, you are going to hit burnout and you're going to hit rock bottom, and you're going to feel almost like a sense of contempt about your business, because it creates this downward spiral effect where then if you don't charge your value, then no one's going to ever, understand what your true value is. And so the biggest takeaway in that sense with pricing is price in a way that makes you take it seriously. And that was kind of a phrase that went through my head when I was getting to a point where I was saying yes to clients I probably shouldn't have been saying yes to. I was saying yes to discounting my service. I was working with people on pricing, and just enough is enough. I wasn't taking those projects seriously anymore because I felt contemptful about them almost. And I knew it wasn't what I was worth. And so when I finally could say, okay, this is my number, this is what it takes for me to take this project seriously, not only did I raise that price to what that number was, but I only got to work with the ideal clients who understood that. So as scary as that was to make that kind of very concrete, direct leap, again, it put me in a position to only work with people that I enjoyed and who totally understood it.
That is fantastic. Well, you've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. We've been here with Shauna Mackenzie talking about her new program, the Yes Diet, and how no will actually increase your profits and productivity in your business. This is a big one for entrepreneurs. And we've got a special treat over at thrivinglaunch.com. You can get all of the resources that Shauna has mentioned today, and also access to her program over there. So go over to Thriving Launch, check it out. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Great to have you here today, Shauna. Awesome tips, by the way. So I've got some no's to say to people today.
Hopefully not me, because
no, I won't be saying no to you.
Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there. Hey, check out the next episode. It's How to Make Passive Income Part 5. It's our mini series that we've been doing on passive income. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps.